So we're engaged in the teaching of Buddha Dharma, and on the part of the audience, whether you are traditionally Buddhist or Buddhists from a new community that were not historically Buddhist, but we all accept the Buddha to be the teacher, our teacher. And since the Buddha came on this earth, one of the key messages that brought to the world is the emphasis on love and compassion as the source of happiness for all beings. Of course, there are many spiritual teachers have emerged in this world, as explained before, who taught that message as well. But among them, the Buddha, the rationale that the Buddha uses for promoting love and compassion is really the teaching on dependent origination of the law of cause and effect. And this is how the Buddha promotes compassion and love. Therefore, in the 27th chapter of Nagarjuna's text, when the Nagarjuna recollects the Buddha's kindness, he pays homage to the Buddha for teaching compassion and also the right view out of compassion for the benefit of all beings. So in this particular passage, Nagarjuna identifies two key qualities of the Buddha: his great compassion and his teaching of the right view. So among all the enlightened activities of the Buddha, the speech activity is the most important. And the speech activity, enlightened speech activity, if it emerges from the motivation of compassion for all beings, then it will be very beneficial. So even though someone might be speaking something very eloquent, but if the underlying motive is not altruistic, then its beneficial effect on others will be limited. So Nagarjuna identifies compassion for all beings as one of the key attributes of the Buddha. And then he says, another key attribute he identifies is the Buddha's wisdom. And he said that because there are many different distorted views about reality, and the antidote to overcome all of these distorted views is only by cultivating the correct view. Because the distorted view or perspective can only be removed by cultivating the opposite perspective, which is the correct view and the correct perspective. For example, if we do not know alphabets, that ignorance can only be removed by learning the alphabets. We cannot remove that ignorance by taking medication or making a wish or making a prayer. So it's only by cultivating the knowledge of the alphabets that ignorance of the alphabets will be removed. So similarly, in order to dispel and remove the distorted view grasping at inherent existence of all phenomena, it is only by cultivating the view, the correct view of emptiness, one can achieve that goal. So therefore, the Buddha taught the right view in order for sentient beings to eliminate all distorted views. So what is the method for eliminating the distorted views? This is explained in the homage stanza of Nagarjuna's text itself. So in the homage stanza, Nagarjuna explains how the Buddha taught the dependent origination, the view of dependent origination, which presents the correct view of the reality, because it is on the basis of our interaction with the reality that our experience of happiness and suffering arises. And since happiness is what we instinctively aspire for, and suffering is something that we instinctively, do not wish, so the causes and conditions that lead to suffering are something that are harmful, And so therefore, when we talk about benefit and right or wrong, we can only understand it on the basis of defining, their relation to human experience, sentient beings' experience of suffering and happiness. So, and the causes and conditions of all of these afflictions are really rooted ultimately in the fundamental ignorance. So it is the fundamental ignorance which obscures us from perceiving the actual nature of reality. And due to that kind of ignorance, we distortedly relate to the world and our own existence. And that elimination of that kind of distorted perception requires the cultivation of the correct view that enables us to relate to the world in accordance with the actual reality. Because in our own perception, everyday perception, we perceive things to possess objective inherent existence, we grasp onto it, and this grasping lays the basis for the arising of karma and other afflictions. So it is only by eliminating that fundamental ignorance that we can remove all of these distortions. So, for example, Aryadeva in his 400 stanzas explains how just as the body faculty permeates all of our sensory faculties, in the same manner, grasping the ignorance, fundamental ignorance, underpins all of our other afflictions. So he uses the analogy of the body, how the body faculty pervades all other sensory faculties. So in the same manner, all afflictions are rooted ultimately in fundamental ignorance. They either accompany ignorance or they are caused by ignorance. So there isn't a single instance of affliction that is not causally connected with fundamental ignorance. So the fundamental ignorance therefore permeates all forms of mental afflictions. So what then is that ignorance? So in general, when we talk about ignorance, so there are different levels of subtlety in identifying what actually the ignorance is. And that difference in the subtlety of identifying ignorance is a function of the subtlety of one's philosophical standpoint and understanding of emptiness. So because the distorted view of reality is the nature of ignorance. So in the 70 stanzas on the middle way, or emptiness, Nagarjuna explains how it is grasping at the inherent existence of all phenomena that are causally conditioned. This is the fundamental ignorance. So there are many similar texts in which it is the grasping at inherent existence that is defined as the ignorance. And this ignorance permeates all forms of afflictions. So therefore, all afflictions can be eliminated by eliminating the root, which is the fundamental ignorance. So this is the fundamental ignorance grasping at true existence of phenomena. So once we are able to eliminate that fundamental root, all afflictions will automatically cease. It's just like when you block the source river of a source of a spring, the spring dries up. So what is the right view that needs to be cultivated to eliminate the ignorance? And then the same text, 400 stanzas, Aryadeva says that, so he says that when you see the truth of dependent origination, then there is no basis for the arising of the ignorance. So once you have a clear understanding of dependent origination, so once you recognize that the grasping at true existence has no basis, that it is simply a matter of instance of distortion, then one will be able to eliminate that ignorance. So the two attributes of the Buddha, his compassion and his wisdom, are the most important one. In the Tibetan tradition, we identify three deities of lineages, very important. The Buddha of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri, and these two, the method and wisdom, needs to be united indivisibly. And in order to have an indivisible union, you have the deity Vajrapani. It becomes important. Vajrapani represents the union of method and wisdom. So therefore, these three deities are considered very important in the Tibetan tradition. So the essence of the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha, all of these were taught by the Buddha out of compassion, great compassion, and for the purpose of eliminating all distorted views. This is what Nagarjuna says at the end of his text. So when we engage in the actual practice of the Dharma, the sequence is on the first level, we need to eliminate all forms of negative and non-virtuous actions, negative karma. So the first step or the first stage is to really eliminate and abandon negative actions. So as Nagarjuna explains in the Precious Garland, the object of aspirations of a spiritual practitioner is twofold. One is the immediate object of aspiration, which is to attain higher rebirth, fortunate rebirth. And then the ultimate object of aspiration is the attainment of liberation, enlightenment. So the ideal existence that would afford us the opportunity to cultivate the path to enlightenment is fortunate rebirth, like a human rebirth. Therefore, so that taking birth as a human being becomes very important for Dharma practice. And the factors that obstruct the attainment of higher rebirth are the engaging in the negative actions, such as the 10 kind, the 3 activities of the body, 3 action, and 4 activities of the speech, and then 3 actions of mind. So these avoidance of the 10 negative actions is a key practice. So the karmic actions, karma that is accumulated from engaging in these 10 negative actions are the non-virtuous karma. So the first step of a spiritual practitioner is to observe the morality of 10 precepts. So, for example, if one may talk about emptiness, bodhicitta, and so on, but on a day-to-day basis, if one does not engage in living a moral life, then there will be no effect. So that when it comes to practice, the first step is the practice of morality. And here, a practitioner takes specific precepts of a lay person practitioner, a monastic, and so on, from the Upasika vows and so on. So this is the first step of the spiritual practice. And that kind of morality of abstaining from the 10 negative actions, this is actually not unique to the Buddha Dharma. This is common to all spiritual traditions, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and so on. So there might be differences in what one would identify as the wrong view, depending on the philosophical outlook of the different traditions. For example, from a theistic religious point of view, the denial of God's existence would be seen as a wrong view. So, of course, the way in which you define what constitutes wrong view may differ from tradition to tradition, but the basic structure of the 10 avoidance from the 10 negative actions remains similar to all traditions. So, therefore, in the theistic traditions, we spoke about the issue of life afterlife. So the point is that for the devout, if you engage in the ethical teachings of your tradition in the correct way, then the afterlife is assured, a good afterlife is assured. Now the second stage of the spiritual practice is the overcoming of the view of self. And this is unique to Buddha Dharma, because except for Buddhism, all other spiritual traditions presume the reality of an eternal self, a soul, an Atman. And our object of sense of self is considered as having some kind of eternal existence. And not only do we have this kind of innate grasping at self, but the philosophical reasoning is presented to strengthen that view in these other traditions. So for the Buddhist practitioner, the second stage is to really overcome the view of self. This is very unique to the Buddhist practice. So here we're talking about wisdom, the wisdom of no self. So this is how actually teaching of the no self is how, for example, Dharmakirti establishes the reliability and authenticity of the Buddha as the teacher. So when it comes to the actual practice, you need to engage in 3 higher trainings: training in morality, and training in concentration, and then training in wisdom. So that is very unique to the Buddhist tradition. But generally, the 3 trainings can be found in non-Buddhist traditions as well. I've had conversations with non-Buddhist practitioners, and I remind them that the 3 trainings, morality, meditation, and wisdom, all of these 3 trainings are common to all the spiritual traditions. Now, where the traditions differ is identification of what constitutes wisdom, and these are unique to the individual traditions. So I used to tell them that these are individual business. For example, for the Buddhist, we admire the teaching on no self, but this is Buddhist business. And then the non-Buddhist Indian traditions, believe in Atman, and this is their business. But common practices are the 3 trainings. But what is different is the teaching on no self. Therefore, because of this differentiation of the rejection of self, in the Buddhist tradition, the 3 trainings are referred to as the 3 higher training. And when the morality practice is underpinned by understanding of no self, then it becomes a higher training on morality. When one's meditation is reinforced by awareness of no self, it becomes higher training and concentration, and so on. So we will now read from the leftover from yesterday of the text. We are on page 80. Kamalashila goes on to say that the Bodhisattva should not simply be absorbed in emptiness, but also engage in the method aspects of the practice, such as generosity and so on. So because if one's absorbed just in emptiness, so then one will fall into the extreme of just the peace of nirvana. So what is required here is the great compassion, compassion for all beings, so that the bodhisattva, does not fall into either the extreme of samsara or nor that of nirvana. So then the text goes on to say that if the practitioner ignores the method aspect of the path and remains absorbed just on emptiness, then one will fall into the extreme of attaining just the arahat state of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. But on the other hand, if one's realization of emptiness is complemented with the method aspect of the path, such as compassion, bodhicitta, and so on, then one's path will lead to the attainment of full omniscience of the Buddha. So in the Mahayana text, one extreme is identified as the extreme of nirvana, where someone who attains nirvana remains totally absorbed in the bliss of nirvana. The text then goes on to present a lot of citations from various sutras about the need for both method aspects of the path and wisdom aspects of the path. I have a little sore throat today. candy for my throat. Recently, a TV interviewer asked me, "What's in your bag?" So I showed I have candies in my bag, and then pen, and then the glasses, and then there's a whole set for toothbrush, cleaning my teeth. And the more seriously, I have an image of the Buddha, which all fully ordained monks are supposed to always be with them, carry with them. This is the one that I received when I received my ordination when I was young. And the one that originally I had received is quite a big one. So I found a smaller image, which is sort of a clay imprint of Smriti Jnana Kirti. Someone gave it to me, and then I approached my teacher, Kapcha Ling Rinpoche, and I've left it at Ling Rinpoche's place for a week to consecrate it. And then I asked him to transfer the blessing so that this is what I would like to carry around. It's smaller. So that's what I have. Smriti was an 11th century Indian master who came to Tibet. So Kamalashila goes on to, explain how the ultimate bodhicitta requires the generation of the awakening mind and genuine aspiration for the attainment of Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So to attain the path of seeing on the Mahayana path, you also need to have the realization of bodhicitta and compassion. So in the Heart Sutra, for example, we have the mantra Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhiswa, and this particular statement is correlated with the 5 stages of the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So Gate means to go. So the first one is the path of accumulation, and then the second one, repetition, refers to the path of preparation, and the third one refers to the path of seeing. And so go beyond, and go beyond perfectly. That's the path of meditation. And Bodhisvaha is the path of no more learning. So these 5 stages of the path are present in the Sarvaka path, Pratyaga, as well as the Bodhisattva path. In the Ornament of Clear Realization text, text on Perfection of Wisdom, when presentation of the path of meditation is made, it talks about the various attributes of the Bodhisattva, explains how an advanced Bodhisattva would also use afflictions like attachment as a means to bring about the welfare of other sentient beings, suggesting the possibility of transforming skillfully even afflictions on the path. So, right at the beginning of the summary of the text, Kamalashila explained how identify, importance of the union, inseparable union of method and wisdom. So here he repeats that summary point. So he explains that while you're in a formal sitting and totally equipoised in emptiness, there is no discursivity. So at that point, your mind is completely absorbed in emptiness, and there is no other mental activity going on. So it's like a space-like experience. So of course, this is a culmination of a long process, initially beginning with studying, then critically reflecting upon it, and once you have gained deeper conviction, then your mind is placed single-pointedly upon emptiness, with no other thought processes going on. So all forms of diverse perceptions, whether internal or external, come to cease. So I have friends, meditators. Some of them told me that their teachers who are deeply absorbed in meditation are so focused that when there are people walking around, they're never distracted. So this is the kind of single-pointed absorption, and especially when that kind of absorption occurs in relation to emptiness, then all forms of dualism comes to an end. So while you are in that kind of meditative state, with your mind is totally equipoised, then no other activities, even compassion or engaging in generous activities, will not arise. But however, when you arise out of that meditative state, during the post-meditation periods, then you engage in virtuous activity with a full awareness, vivid awareness of the emptiness. So what is important is before you enter into the meditation on emptiness, you first reinforce your bodhicitta and then engage in the meditation on emptiness. And once you rise out of that emptiness meditation, then you have to cultivate the view of all perception of all things as a kind of illusion-like. So in this way, the whole 24 hours of your experience of life is somehow kind of colored by the awareness of emptiness.
장주 사만지 싫어던 특히 수 관내 주변 원도 특 관내 주변 원도 제님의 대조 코어나 내가 임발라 상반은 양을 낸다바 라양 나베는 제가도 대도도 원인이 제신 명령을 전하는 방향도 전조 용소에 배치고 나서배 또 공부하잖아. 전배장주 예생제 배장 연도 땅보로 뒤뒤로 신내다 항도 배정도 제녀로 공부하잖아. 바고 주요 용도다 노래. 내가 단저 심지에 배장주 상반은 예편이 지게도 또 대전도 요전배 주상자도 털나게 공부하고 대단한 인지당. 타오당 전주에서 공부 대제 대스 천들어 되면서 잡아는 주대스 나가다 진짜로다 전주 웃음도 돈이
So, if you train your mind in bodhicitta, compassion, and emptiness through studying, critical reflection, and if you spend your days and life in this way, and then cultivate the familiarity, then it begins to influence every aspect of your life, even your dream. So, in this way, your 24 hours of your daily life will be an occasion for increasing your virtue. So as you spend your life in this way, a year, decade, and many decades, in this way, your life becomes meaningful. And if you live your life with such purpose, then you will be able to make a lot of progress, and even your dreams will become auspicious, and so on. 대달 인지당 탑다 전주섬 다도 그걸 유는도 겁나 림기 생기규 신도 영수 답이 계신 중에 영수 멤버 교배시 수신수배 매신도 양한답에 전로 공부를 타르 신부를 주네 지대는 대배 이시 떡배 자와. And then Kamalashila goes on to explain that how if one trains one mind in compassion, bodhicitta, and emptiness in this manner, then eventually, just like the dry wood, the wrapping of which causes fire, but also consumes, burns that wood itself, in the same manner, all forms of discursivity and thought processes will come to an end, and you will gain direct realization of emptiness, and that's when you have attained the path of seeing. And that's when the first stage of cessation has become a reality within yourself. And that's the true Dharma. And also the path that brought about that cessation is also Dharma. And then your conviction in the Dharma will really be firm.
대중네 지도에 뭐에 탈라 믿고를 주고 인데 디지십에 육수 깨봐 인다 전수뭐 사주 통람네 야 사주 셰베 다 사탕고 통는 유자네 디지십에 육수 깨봐 인 전수선에 깨면발을 주고 인
So then the text goes on to explain that through this achievement you enter into the path focusing on the reality of things, and you're then born in the family of the Tathagatas. You enter the stainless state of the Bodhisattva and turn away from all wandering births in the cycle of existence and abide in the suchness of the Bodhisattvas and attain the first Bodhisattva level. And the text goes on to explain that all of these attributes of the Bodhisattva on the first level are explained in the 10 level sutra, Dasabhumi Sutra, which is the basis for Chandrakirti's entering the mind text. So as the Bodhisattva attains the 10 levels of the Bodhisattva step by step gradually, so towards the end, the last 3 stages, sorry, the first 7 stages are referred to as the impure stages or levels, and then on the 8th Bodhisattva level, then the direct antidote to elimination of affliction arises. And at that point, one has become an arhat. Because one has overcome the 4 of afflictions. And as the last 3 stages are perfected, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, so although one has completely eliminated the afflictions, so it is the subtle imprints and the predispositions of the afflictions, the residual impressions that are being eliminated. For example, in Chandrakirti's writings, he identifies the subtle obscuration to knowledge, the subtle defilements, as the predispositions imprinted upon one's mind by the afflictions. So even these residual impressions are now being eliminated on the next 3 stages. Then it goes to explain that entering the ocean of omniscience, you possess impeccable jewel-like qualities to sustain sentient beings, and these fulfill your previous positive aspirations. And this is when you fulfill the prayer which we make on a regular basis. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So you eliminate all the obscurations and their impressions in a gradual way and attain all the levels in a gradual way, sequential way. And at the final stage of the 10th level, immediately after that, then within a single moment of awareness, the omniscient wisdom of the Buddha arises. It says that the individual then becomes the embodiment of great compassion, possessing various skillful means that function spontaneously and work in various emanations in the interest of all beings. And in addition, all marvelous attributes are perfected, with total elimination of all defilements and their residual potential. All Buddhas abide to help every sentient being. So he says that everyone should endeavor to actualize these qualities. So it is a complete introduction to the Buddha Dharma has been found here. So first, beginning with explaining the nature of reality, which is the ground, and then the method of training one's mind, first in compassion, particularly accompanied by reflection upon the nature of suffering, and then the 3 higher trainings, with the second stage involving overcoming and eliminating the view of self, which involves cultivating shamatha as a basis and cultivating the actual antidote, which is the insight, the wisdom of emptiness. So for the Tibetan Buddhists, because Vajrayana is so widespread, there are methods for cultivating shamatha in conjunction with the Vajrayana practice, which is effective. Particularly, shamatha focused on the nature of one's mind, reflecting upon the nature of emptiness of mind itself. And this is something that is very important in the Vajrayana tradition. Although, insofar as emptiness is concerned, there is no difference between the emptiness of external object like a vase or internal phenomenon like a mind. But in terms of efficacy and effectiveness, meditation on the emptiness of mind is more powerful. So, the meditation on emptiness upon which you do it makes a difference. So here in the Vajrayana tradition, meditation on the emptiness of mind is emphasized. So for example, in the terminology of Guhya Samaja Tantra, one speaks of the isolated mind. The same is true also in the Dzogchen teachings, similarly in the Sakya profound view, and same in the case of Kagyu Mahamudra, the Great Seal practice. So all of these are equal in emphasizing the meditation on emptiness of the mind itself. So then the text goes on to conclude by summarizing that the Buddha thus said, the omniscient, non-transcendent wisdom is produced with compassion as its root, the awakening mind of bodhicitta as its cause, and it's perfected by skillful means. His Holiness is now reading from the colophon of the text. He says that at the request of the emperor, he composed these stages of the meditation. So it is at the request of the Emperor Tison Dezen. So this is a text that has a special connection with the Tibetan people. Shantarakshita and his disciple Kamalashila, their kindness to the Tibetans is profound. So for example, if you look at the Tibetan tradition, the comprehensive nature of the Tibetan Buddhism really owes to Kamalashila and Shantarakshita, especially the extent to which the study and practice of the epistemological text became so established in Tibet. Shantarakshita and Kamalashila's approach to Buddhism is quite impressive. It's very broad perspective and taking into account the philosophical positions of India. And the Tibetan emperors were very impressive. They primarily invited Indian masters, and especially masters of the Nalanda tradition. I often say that the Tibetan Buddhism is a Nalanda tradition. And one of the reasons for that is because sometimes Western scholars have described Tibetan Buddhism as a form of Lamaism. And this has caused us a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions about the Tibetan tradition. So I emphasize that the Tibetan tradition is the Nalanda tradition. So, and Nalanda was one of the most important centers of learning, which is recognized as an important authoritative tradition. And secondly, in Tibet we have a lot of different denominations, Nyingma, and within Nyingma the ones that emphasize the sutra approach, and the one emphasizes the visionary revelation texts. And within the new translation schools, you have Kagyu, Sakya, Kadampas, and the new Kadampa, which is Gelugpa, and Chonang, and so on. So there are many diverse traditions in the Tibetan Buddhism. So, and when you present the uniqueness of each of the tradition, people do not do it from showing their realization and understanding. So then they differentiate themselves by having different colors of hat, saying, I am a Kagyupa, I am a Nyingmapa, I am a yellow hat Gelugpa, and so on. This is pretty embarrassing. So what is important is to have the mastery of the meaning and teaching of the entire canonical collection. This is the teaching of the Kanyuru. This is the understanding of the commentarial tradition of the Nalanda masters, of the Madhyamaka masters, the Chittamatra masters, and so on. And then there are specific instructions that are relevant to individual practitioners, such as in the Nyingma tradition, you have the 9 yanas presentation, including the Dzogchen teachings and so on. So if you are able to present the uniqueness of Dzogchen approach on the basis of the overall understanding of the framework of the Buddha Dharma, then it becomes impressive. The same is true also of Sakya tradition. One speaks of public explication and pupil explications and so on, and the profound view of the union of clarity and profound. And if these unique views of Sakya are grounded in the overall understanding of the Buddha Dharma and the framework of the Buddhist path, then of course it becomes impressive. But simply being called a Sakyapa is not enough. The same is true also of the Kagyupa tradition, because the philosophical view of the Kagyupas come from Marpa Lotsawa and Milarepa and Gampopa, who all trace their view to Maitripa, who was a Madhyamaka master. So if the unique instructions of the Kagyu, such as Mahamudra and the 6 yogas, are explained on the basis of overall understanding of the frame of the Buddhist path, then it will be very impressive. The same is true of the Gelug, union of bliss and emptiness. If these are grounded in the overall presentation of the general Buddhist approach, so the Gelugpas is slightly better, because the Gelugpas emphasize a lot on study of the classics. In the past, Sakyas also had this tradition, but now Gelugpas are very strong when it comes to the study and understanding of the great classics. But the unique instructions of the Gelug really lies in the Vajrayana teachings on Guhya Samaja, Chakrasamvara, and Yamantaka, which are more specific instructions. So therefore, I think it's very important to read different texts and instructions of different traditions as well. And so when you study a text, you should not confine your understanding just to your own tradition's interpretation. You should really broaden your perspective. So when you study a classical text, you should not approach it through the medium of faith, saying, oh, wonderful, wonderful, but rather you should approach it with a critical inquiry. What are the key questions? The same, this is the approach that Tsongkhapa. And for example, for the Gelugpas, if you look at Tsongkhapa's writings in, say, a Golden Rosary, which is an impressive text, but when it comes to the philosophical views presented there, because it's written in the early part of Tsongkhapa's life, some of the philosophical presentations there are open to question. But if you compare them against the mature writings of Tsongkhapa, there is a difference. So you need to be more comparative and broader in your perspective when you read. Then you will be able to achieve what Dromtonpa says, that when you approach the Buddha Dharma, you should be able to lift the entirety of the Buddha Dharma, like 4 people lifting a whole square cloth from all 4 sides. So the we Tibetans have this beautiful and rich tradition, and if we are not able to optimize this would be tragedy. So with that, the commentary explanation of the text is complete. His Holiness is asking how long the long life ceremony will take. The chant master says about an hour. So I have a weak niece, So climbing up on the throne is difficult, but once I'm sit down, I'm very comfortable. I can keep on talking for hours. So I always tell people that if you are someone who has a faith in the Buddha Dharma, we need to become 21st century Buddhist. And how does one become a 20th century Buddhist? 20th century Buddhist, by 20th century Buddhist, I mean someone whose understanding of the Dharma is grounded in an appreciation of the philosophical teachings of the 4 classical Indian Buddhist schools. I'm not talking about the 4 Tibetan traditions. I'm talking about the 4 classical Indian Buddhist schools. And on that basis, you will be able to develop a faith in the Buddha Dharma grounded in understanding and through the application of reasoning. And then you will become a 21st century Buddhist. But otherwise, you will have to say, I'm a Buddhist because my father was a Buddhist, my mother was a Buddhist, and my teacher said so, my guru said so, and so on. And if you ask that teacher what was his understanding, he may say, well, I have received the teaching from someone, and so on and so forth. And calling yourself a Buddhist simply because your parents happen to be Buddhist is not enough. You have to use your human intelligence, a brain that has been gifted to you. So, just as we, in ordinary language, we speak of training a horse, in the same manner, we have to train our mind. So it's important to really study the philosophical teachings and compare the philosophical outlooks of the different schools, and also appreciate the uniqueness of the Buddhist philosophical standpoints. And the Buddhist philosophical positions are now actually consonant with most of the scientific worldview, and therefore it is important to really develop a faith in the Dharma grounded in understanding and reason. And this is an approach I've emphasized among the exiled Tibetans. And in future too, if we ever go back to Tibet, inside Tibet as well, I would hope that the people inside Tibet would be able to really approach their Buddha Dharma through this kind of critical inquiry and understanding, not just carry a rosary in their hand and recite mantra. It is important to know what the Buddha Dharma is. So study is crucial. So here, I've actually said this before. There was in Kham, Eastern Tibet, there was abbot. Someone has come to see the abbot of the monastery. And so when he arrived at the monastery, the abbot was not in residence. So he asked the attendant, saying, one of the monks, where is the abbot? I need to see him. And then one of his attendants told him, today the abbot is not in residence. He had gone to visit the town, the village, to scare the old, men and women, the grandparents, because in the old days, because of the emphasis on teaching on karma and faith and so on, it becomes almost like scaring people away, telling people that, you have to have faith in the guru. Guru can never make any mistakes and so on. These kind of teachings are never found in the Buddha's own teachings. In the Vinaya, in the Sutra, in the Tantras, qualifications of the teachers are presented. Similarly, Tsongkhapa says that if you don't have a disciplined mind yourself, how can you, help train other students? So Tsongkhapa says that it is not adequate to have partial knowledge of the Buddha Dharma. You need to have a way of instructing your students that is grounded in a deeper appreciation of the essence of the Buddha Dharma. And the 10 qualifications of the the qualified teacher are presented in the scriptures. And this is what Tsongkhapa has emphasized, which I think is very important. And Dromtonpa said that when a Mahayana teacher should be summoned as such that when he teaches the Dharma, will be able to bring a comprehensive approach. So simply being able to scare the devout is not enough. I don't think that is a great service to the Buddha Dharma. So what is helpful is to help students develop a fuller understanding of the essence of the Buddha's teaching. And on my part, I tried to have that kind of approach on the Buddha Dharma. I read a lot. I'm 80 years old, but I never give up my studies. Study, critical reflection, and meditation. Whenever I have a free time, I read texts. And in future, if I have more time, I would like to read more of the classical Indian Buddhist texts in the Tengyur and more writings of the great Tibetan masters. I have read a lot in the past, but lately I've been so busy, I haven't had much time to read, but I have the strong desire to continue to read. I could boast here a little bit. So in one of the biographies, I read a biography. So Kutun, who was a student of Atisha, there was a conversation, and someone said that the writing of such and such master was wonderful. And Kutun, so Kutun said that so long as the text hasn't come to my attention, it's very difficult to judge the quality of that writing. So I could boast because I've read a lot. So when I read a new text, I always ask question, what was the point? What is the significance? I don't accept at the face value. And then when I read, and if I find something that is logically contradictory, I try to seek out why did the author make this statement. So as I said yesterday, even among Nagarjuna's own followers, there were a lot of debates on the interpretation of Nagarjuna's intention. So among Tibetan writers, sometimes the epithet all-knowing is used, like Putun and so on. So when I read their writings, even though the tradition may refer to them as all-knowing master, but I approach them with a critical perspective. So for example, so there's a commentary on one of the Vajrayana texts in Putun, and I read it, and I approached it with such excitement. So when there are critically important points, he just glosses over it without any explanation. So I thought, okay. So when you study, you need to be able to really get to the bottom. So once there was a Mongolian scholar called Kagatempa. He was a Mongolian scholar, a great scholar from Gomang Monastery, Drepung Gomang. So I was told by one of my philosophical assistants. So when he told me that when this master reads a text, he would spend hours on a single page contemplating. So this is what is meant by profound, penetrating wisdom. So he doesn't leave his understanding just on the level of words. So he critically reflects on the points presented in the text and deeply contemplates it by comparing to what he had read elsewhere and what he himself understands. So even a single page, he spends hours. And he was a great, great scholar. He was also quite boastful, apparently. So when he took his final Geshe examinations, after that he went to see Geshe Pupuchok. And so Pupuchok told him that people tell me that you are like a real, Manjushri in life. And he said, I'm not a, Manjushri in person, but I'm actually a neighbor of Manjushri. So he was quite boastful. He was a great scholar. Drepung Komang and Loseling, when they have inter-college debates in Drepung, and Ling Rinpoche told me that he was one of the debaters, and Kagatempa, this scholar, was in defense. So Ling Rinpoche said that he really prepared a very complicated problem from Abhidharma. So as he began and opened this debate, Kagatempa said, so he said that I didn't come here to report to you my memorization of the root text of Abhidharma Kosha. If you have a question, bring it up, but don't ask me to various lists and so on. And if we have to recite the text, then let's all recite together. So Ling Rinpoche told me that he became very nervous because this Kagatempa was not allowing the debate to move in the direction that they were originally planned. So when you study a text, you shouldn't just skim read it. You really have to reflect upon the meaning and text and compare it with your previous understanding, and then do a critical comparison. So like an analytic meditation. This is really important. So this is important, yeah. So when I give introduction to Dharma, I don't scare old people. I always emphasize the explanation of the overall framework of the Buddhist path. So all of you really have to study texts. So do you agree? So next, so we will do a ceremony of generating the aspiring aspect of the bodhicitta, which we will combine with the empowerment ceremony. So it's a long life empowerment of white Tara, a Tara of longevity. Sermel Hajun Rinpoche, the previous reincarnation, who was a great Lama, who was a contemporary of the 13th Dalai Lama, a close friend of the 13th Dalai Lama as well. So he also accompanied the 13th Dalai Lama when he visited Mongolia. So Hajun Rinpoche once told me, so he said he had constructed an image of white Tara for the long life of the 13th Dalai Lama as he was doing a meditation. Sorry, for the sake of His Holiness, the present His Holiness. So when he was meditating on it, he had a vision of a strong light emerging from the white Tara's image and entering into his body. So it was in the it was in the 50s. I was in my early 20s. I was about 22 or 23. So Lhajun Rinpoche, so it told me that you will live long. So when he did the long life meditation, Lhajun Rinpoche said that he had this vision of a very strong, bright light emerging from the statue entering to me. So now I've reached age 80, so he was kind of prophetic. So I've also shared with some other people. I can share here as well. Recently, I have had problems with my knees, so I have consulted some doctors, physicians regularly. So some specialists on knees came to see me. Some of them, arranged by some of my friends. So there was a Chinese traditional medicine physician. So there was an expert of the traditional Chinese medicine. I met him. So he checked my pulse and looked at my face. So he said that judging by the current condition of your body, I have no doubt you will live 100 years. So you have written number 80 down there. So it's also a celebration of 80 years. But then there will be another decades. Maybe the next one is 90, and the next one is 100. So that even then we are talking only about 20 years. So that means the bulk of my life is gone. But I have no regrets, because while I've been alive, as much as possible, I strove to engage in the Buddhist practice in accordance with the approach of Nagarjuna and his followers, and also as much as possible try to help others and work for the benefit of other sentient beings. Just as Tsongkhapa says that when I was young, I strove in this vast learning. Of course, when I was very young, I was lazy, but later on, I studied hard. One of my colleagues was Ngudup Tsonyi, a philosophical attendant. And then after the exams were over, we visited on a kind of a pilgrimage. So we were supposed to re-study and revisit Tsongkhapa's text on differentiating provisional and definitive meanings of the sutras. So after reaching India, I revisited many of the classical texts that I had studied. Spent a lot of time in the initial stage of my exile life studying. So, of course, I'm not very keen on the traditional Buddhist cosmology, which gives a lot of calculations and so on, with the Mount Meru in the middle and so on. So those aspects of the text I don't believe in, nor am I interested in them. But when it comes to the epistemological text, the philosophical texts, and the perfection of wisdom studies, they are really profound, especially the Indian master's texts. So it is important to spend your life in study, critical reflection, and meditation, which you cannot accomplish in 1 year, 1 day, or 1 year, or 1 month. We are talking about something that needs to be done in decades, 30, 40 years. It doesn't matter whether you are a layperson or a monastic member. So what is helpful is to have a long life and a healthy life, and then you will be able to use your human life with the full faculty intact in your Dharma practice and the service of others. So when you seek longevity through empowerment such as this, there's no point in just wishing for longer life. For example, if you have a long life but spend it in a destructive way, then there's no point. On the other hand, if you are able to do good, and then a long and healthy life can truly be meaningful and purposeful. So the purpose of receiving longevity empowerment is to ensure a long and healthy life so that you will be able to utilize in a constructive way for the benefit of others. So the long life empowerment today is that of White Tara. So that the transmission comes from Lajun Rinpoche. So for the performance of the ceremony, first I will perform the ritual of Torma to expel any obstacles and hindrances that might be there for the receiving of this empowerment.
digital chance on the summit of Kundalana on the don't want you to you don't on the Rangi to get the meal, think you go, can then you know one and all. Sometimes the most you should call the songs on the journal about the cases on you, the one you go and you. Almost all being and was on the. I don't know, I don't know, so much was all being and was all the way, was all the longer one among was all being and was all the way, was all the one among all. Was all being and was all the way, was all the one among all was all being and was all the one among all. Also, one is a long Gana, but Gana, also one is a long Gana, but one of them be other, also one is a long Gana, but Anna Bunga and Beer, and the home, so much was in the logic and the Saji got about the she got about the you got about the and then the machine or the one you got what the thank you. Can I know what they know? Was you going to what was somebody is wrong, Yana, somebody is wrong, Omana Banga beer, as on the Bazami the Kunala, 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 Bazami the Kunala, no home, down the one of the Yata Sisi Shukoda, Sama.
So to perform the long life empowerment of White Tara, on the part of the guru, preliminary rituals have to be performed of generating himself into the identity of the meditation deity, and on the part of the students you have to make a mandala offering. Guru Rana Manda Niyadaya Amen. So I've received the long life empowerment of White Tara from Tata Rinpoche many times and from Ling Rinpoche many times. And I've also done the retreat several times. And the sadhana of White Tara, I do it on a daily basis. It's part of my daily practice. So in my life, I get up around 2:30, or around 2:30 or 3 every morning, and I do some of the longevity practices, and then I do Guru Yoga and do some meditation based on that, and then the deity yoga. So in all of these practices, the most important aspect is the meditation on emptiness and bodhicitta. So, and to generate bodhicitta. So I spend about 5 hours every morning, and primarily on bodhicitta and emptiness. And then I do self-empowerment every day. This is how I find it helpful, because it makes the visualizations and all of these practices very alive. But I go to bed early. Around 6:30, I go to bed. So that's my daily life pattern. So when I explain to you, sitting on the practice, telling you to meditate, I on my part myself, I also meditate on a daily basis. I practice. So every day, about 5 hours, I spend meditation and practice. I find it very helpful. And during the daytime, if I have a spare time, then I read and I study. I critically reflect. So on your part too, so you have an attitude of seeing me as a friend, as a spiritual colleague or spiritual brother, or maybe even of a teacher or a guru. So on my part too, my motivation is to help you to turn your mind towards Dharma and familiarize your mind towards the Dharma, so that you'll be able to live a life based on an understanding where you can apply the essence of the Dharma teachings in your everyday life. And in this respect, the understanding of emptiness is really the most effective one. It's not an easy matter, but it's something that needs to be cultivated and developed over a prolonged period of time. Repeat after me. Sumsangye tamjeji. O Pandan Lama. Dalai Shinkoloi. Tsewa Samozedus. Dalai Shinkoloi. Tsewa Samozedus. Dalai Shinkoloi. Tsewa Samozedus. So for Vajrayana practice, one of the unique features is to bringing results into the path. And this is a practice where you can bring the aspects of the result into your path itself right now. So most importantly, you have to be able to cultivate the perception of your own mind, Guru's mind, and meditation deity as being indivisible. So therefore the practice involves generating oneself as the meditation deity. But if you haven't received empowerment before, then you cannot generate yourself as the deity. So in that case, visualize White Tara at your crown. So in order to confer this empowerment on the part of the Guru, I have generated myself into the form of White Tara as depicted on the Tanka painting with white color, one face, two arms, and the right hand in the gesture of giving and left hand in the gesture of preaching, holding from a stem of a lotus and seated. So imagine the Guru in that form. So first we take the Bodhisattva vows. So for this, imagine in the space where the Tankas are depicted, imagine there is the presence of the Buddha Shakyamuni in real life, and imagine, visualize him being surrounded by the 8 Bodhisattva disciples, and especially the masters of the great Indian tradition whose texts are still extant, such as the 5 texts of Maitreya, Nagarjuna's 6 texts, and so on, which we can enjoy to this day. So imagine the 17 great masters of Nalanda. They are truly our teachers. They are not just lamas from the Nalanda tradition, but they were great ornaments of Nalanda tradition. Their wisdom and their insights are relevant and beneficial even to this day in the 21st century. So in Tibet, there was a tradition of identifying 6 great masters and 2 supreme masters, and I've expanded it by including Buddha Palita, Bhava Viveka, Shantideva, and so on, and Haribhatras and so on. So I felt the need to include them. So I composed a praise to the 17 great masters of Nalanda, and paintings of the Tankas have also been begun. So these are all great teachers. I always say that the Tibetan Buddhism is a Nalanda tradition. We are the custodians of the Nalanda knowledge and Nalanda tradition, because the texts composed by these great masters are the root texts we memorized when we were small, and the commentaries we study, especially the commentaries of the Indian great masters. And then the Tibetan scholars and masters then explained these Indian commentaries. And these are the main texts that we use for our studies. And then, of course, there are Vajrayana teachings. So even the Vajrayana instructions, we ground their authenticity in the teachings of the Indian masters like Nagarjuna, Saraha, 80 Mahasiddhas, and so on. So the most important text, the foundational text, are the text of the 17 great Nalanda masters and so on. So this is really at the core, common core of all the great Tibetan traditions, Sakya, Kagyu, Gelug, Nyingma, and so on. And these texts are studied by members of all the traditions. So imagine the Buddha being surrounded by all of these great Indian Nalanda masters, and visualize also the presence of great Tibetan masters of the Nyingma tradition, Sakya, Kagyu, Kadam, Gelug, and so on, and Chonang as well. And the Pön, for example, in the past, Pön was an autonomous tradition, but after the spread of Buddhism in Tibet, many of the scholars of Pön tradition, they have studied the great Buddhist classics. So the tradition evolved where they study the classical Buddhist texts. For example, the main monastery in India, Menri, I have visited several times. They have a very robust study program there. So today, all Tibetan traditions, including Pön, have become familiar with the great writings of the great Indian masters. So we are all equal in being students of the great Indian Nalanda masters. So visualize the masters of all the Tibetan traditions, the lineage masters, and then at their presence, imagine generating awakening mind. So let's do that ceremony. For this, as I explained yesterday, so in Shantideva's text, in Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he says that the Buddhas have reflected for eons and eons, and they saw that the altruistic intention is the greatest source of happiness for all beings. And the kind heart and the highest form of altruism is an altruistic intention accompanied by the factor of wisdom. And when you have such an altruistic mind, grounded in wisdom, then you have the ultimate cause that is the source of benefit for all beings. And then he goes on to explain, saying that then he goes on to explain that how all the problems in the world are really arises from excessive focus on and self-centeredness, and all the good things in the world really emerge from a perspective and attitude cherishing the welfare of others. And then he says that if you do not exchange your own situation with that of others, let alone not attaining Buddhahood, but even in this circle existence, there will be no happiness. So then he goes on to say that therefore, one should overcome all forms of weariness and then ride the horse of bodhicitta and travel from a place of joy to joy. And what intelligent mind a person would, not embark upon such a journey. So therefore, if one emphasizes the cultivation of altruistic intention, then one will be able to really have the condition for one's own personal happiness as well as happiness of all beings. Making prayers and aspiration alone is not adequate. You need to commit yourself to the practice of bodhicitta. So if you are absolutely committed to bodhicitta and its practice, then there is a guarantee that your future rebirth will be positive. I can guarantee that you. But on your part, if you don't live your life according to virtue, and even though you might make offerings to the Buddhas and monasteries and request the Lamas to pray for you, it's doubtful whether it will ensure a favorable rebirth in future. So there is nothing more powerful than emphasizing the practice of bodhicitta. And that practice of bodhicitta should be really done on the basis of developing a deep conviction based upon understanding the value of bodhicitta. And here, awareness of emptiness, understanding of emptiness becomes really crucial. So here, so for this purpose, you visualize all these great masters in front of you and reflect upon their great kindness and contribution, and recognize that they have attained this state of enlightenment because they emphasize the practice of bodhicitta and lived their life from bodhicitta. So, and therefore, they engaged in enlightened activity, particularly in the enlightened speech. So, reflect upon their qualities of compassion and wisdom, and so as a preliminary for the ceremony of generating the awakening mind, you do the seven limb puja. So repeat after me. Choji Jaba da Jesu Iran Kushi Sowa de Kewa Chungse Tagi Chisa Da Tamje Jonju Chirimu Choji Jaba da Jesu Iran Kushi Sowa de Chungse Tagi Chisa Jonju Chirimu Choji Jaba da Jesu Iran Kushi Sowa de Kewa Chungse Tagi Chisa Bantana So at this juncture in our existence, we have attained a human birth, and without human existence, we will not be able to reflect upon Dharma. So even though we had attained a human birth, if we don't have all the necessary conditions that are conducive to the practice of Dharma, then again it will be a problem. But that's not the case. We have the opportunity and facility to practice Dharma on our part. Individually, we happen to have faith and admiration in the Buddha Dharma. So the conditions and causes will all come together. And also we live in a free country. For example, if we were living in Tibet, although these days it's slightly better, but at one point there was a time when if you have faith in Dharma, you almost like you are committing illegal act. So we are living in a free country, so we have the opportunity and freedom. So if we don't utilize that opportunity, we ourselves will lose. So reflect upon the fact that we have attained the difficult human existence. We have met with the Dharma. We have the opportunity and freedom. So then make the commitment that I shall practice Dharma in accordance with the wishes and intention of the great masters and the Buddha. And the Buddhas, on the part of the Buddha, among all the great attributes of the Buddha, the most important qualities are his compassion and wisdom. And the most important activity, enlightened activity, was the speech, the teaching, Dharma. So as we discussed in Kamalashila's text, so it is on the basis of whether or not bodhicitta is present that the wisdom of emptiness either becomes a cause for attaining just liberation or a full attainment of the Buddhahood. So we develop the conviction that the bodhicitta really is the ultimate cause for the attainment of Buddhahood. So today when we have the opportunity to practice bodhicitta, you should make the commitment that even if I were to live just one day, I will meditate on bodhicitta, I will cultivate bodhicitta. If I had only a year left, I will cultivate bodhicitta. If I have a decade left in my life, I will cultivate bodhicitta. So you have to generate that kind of enthusiasm. So when you do the actual ceremony, although there are many different rituals, so most of the Buddhist practitioners are familiar with the four-line refuge formula, which says, I shall go to refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So we will do the ceremony on the basis of that. So on the daily basis, when you recite this formula, if possible, do it 3 times a day and 3 times in the evening. But if not, at least on a daily basis, you should, reflect upon bodhicitta. So let's do that. So there was a tradition in Tibet where they use simply this refuge formula as part of the ceremony for generating bodhicitta. The Pujo Champa Rinpoche was a great meditator and practitioner and master. It was his custom as well. So let's do that. So here, so when we say to the Buddha, Dharma, and the excellent assembly, so these are the 3 objects of refuge. The Buddha is the teacher, the one that shows the actual refuge. Dharma is the actual refuge, and Sangha, the spiritual community, are the companions for seeking the refuge. So the actual refuge is the Dharma. So there is the scriptural Dharma and the scripture in the form of realization. So the true Dharma are the cessation and the path. And why they are the true refuge is because when you actualize them within yourself, that's how you are saved. Because the moment you actualize cessation, the moment you actualize the path of wisdom of emptiness, it immediately, directly combats with the innate grasping and inherent existence. So once you cultivate that wisdom of no self, then it gradually undermines and eventually leading to total elimination of the ignorance. So analogically, the Buddha is like a physician, Dharma is like the medicine, and the Sangha is like a nurse that help you go through the healing process. So, so the Buddha is actually the teacher or like a physician, and Dharma is like the medicine and the actual teaching. So Buddha shows us the Dharma, and the Dharma you yourself have to actualize. And the true Dharma, true refuge, really is the Dharma. So you said that I shall go for refuge until my enlightenment. So the word for enlightenment in Tibetan is Changchup, composed of 2 syllables. And there are 3 types of or levels of enlightenment: the one of Shravaka, Pratyaga Buddha, and of the Mahayana enlightenment. So here you're talking about the Buddhahood, which is the Mahayana enlightenment. So you're saying, I shall go for refuge until I've attained the highest enlightenment. So here you embrace the attainment of Buddhahood as your highest spiritual aspiration. So in other words, you are seeking your own resultant Buddhahood state that you will actualize eventually. So we're not talking about a Buddha that is outside, a historical figure alone, but we're actually seeking refuge in our own resultant future Buddha. So you cultivate a faith in the form of admiration, the faith in the form of emulation, because you want to become like a Buddha, you want to actualize the Buddha within you, and then you develop a faith of conviction. So there are 3 types of faith: that of admiration, that of conviction, and that of emulation. So on the basis of these kinds of faith, so you're saying that I shall go for refuge until I've attained the Buddhahood. So you are going to refuge not just in the historical Buddha, but also your own future Buddha, which is your own resultant state. And based on developing deep admiration in the truth of the Dharma, and conviction in the truth of the Dharma, and wanting to emulate the examples of the Buddha. So based on that refuge, then you generate the awakening mind. It says, therefore, through the accumulations of engaging in practices such as generosity, ethical discipline, and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings, for the benefit of all beings. So the purpose of engaging in all of these activities is to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So some people say through the merit of generating, engaging in virtuous activities of generosity and so on. But merit is okay, but maybe accumulations is better because it includes both merit and wisdom. Because merit refers more to the virtuous activities belonging to the method aspect of the path. Because merit is one of the two accumulations. So it's better to say made through the accumulations of engaging in activities such as generosity and so on. Then it would include both merit and wisdom. So as Nagarjuna talks about how the two bodies of the Buddha, the truth body and the form body, are results of two accumulations, which are merit and wisdom, which arises on the basis of the understanding of the two aspects of reality, the conventional and the ultimate. So therefore you say, made through the accumulations of engaging in so on. So, in fact, the wisdom is included because when you say, I shall go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So there's a reference to the word I, is supposed to invoke your understanding of the illusion-like understanding of the existence of self. And similarly, when you say, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings, again, this reference to I is there to indicate the need to cultivate and remind oneself the illusion-like character of all phenomena, not just the outside phenomena, but also oneself. So then it includes both the merit as well as wisdom as well. So here, when you reflect deeply upon the word self or I, you will be able to cultivate the wisdom of no self of person, but also the wisdom of phenomena, no self of phenomena, such as the aggregates of body and so on. So yesterday we had a lot of discussions about how even consciousness is composed of series of moments. Anything that has continuity, when you dissect the individual moments of the continuum, nothing can be found. So here you need to be able to bring to your mind the understanding of emptiness. In this way, if you practice it, it becomes powerful. So then you say, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So here you are dedicating all your virtues accumulated through body, speech, and mind, not for your own personal interest, but for the benefit of all beings. And in order to bring about the realization of that wish, you then seek enlightenment. So the monastic members on the stage can kneel, but the main audience, because you're sitting on chair, you can just stay as you are, sit as you are. So you can also exercise your knees a bit. So visualize the Buddha surrounded by all the masters and so on that I explained before. So, and I've just explained you the meaning of these 4 lines. So bring them to your mind, and in the presence of this great assembly, you should make the pledge that I am going to generate the awakening mind. So repeat after me. Sanje Chodan Soji Chonam Lam. Chanju Bardo Dane Kyapso Che. Tage Jinso Jebe Chonam Ki. Dalai Benji Sanje Drubara Sho. Repeat after me the second time, and during this time as well, reinforce your visualization of the assembly in front of you and generate the intention that I shall follow in the examples of the great Buddhas and Bodhisattvas by first generating the awakening mind and then engaging in the path and accumulating the merits and wisdom, and then work for the benefit of all beings. So, and all of us are pervaded by the Buddha nature, and the Buddha's enlightened activity, rays of that, reaches to all of us. So each of us possesses within ourselves the seed for the attainment of Buddha's wisdom. So, and what is needed is to awaken that. So repeat after me. Sanje Chodan Soji Chonam Lam. Chanju Bado Dane Kyapso Che. Tage Jinso Jebe Chonam Ki. Dalai Benji Sanje Drubara Sho. So when you repeat the 3rd time, and when the last line is finished, at that point, you should imagine you reinforce your courage and intention and the pledge to generate the awakening mind, aspiring for the attainment of Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings, and then say, pledge that I shall repeat this refuge formula on a daily basis, not just 3 times, but actually repeatedly on a daily basis. And as you reflect upon and recite these 4 lines, you should reflect deeply upon them to the point that it really moves you to tears. So then it will be effective. But if you don't reflect upon the meaning, then it will be just reciting the words. So just as I've explained the meaning of these 4 lines, bring them to your mind and then recite this refuge formula maybe 10 times. And then if you do it on a daily basis, then it will be really beneficial. And then if you can expand your reading and study, then it will be really wonderful. So with these in your mind, repeat after me the 3rd time. Sanje Chodan Soji Chonam Lam. Chanju Bado Dane Kyapso Che. Tage Jinso Jebe Chonam Ki. Dalai Benji Sanje Drubara Sho. Chanju Samjo Rinpoche. Maje Banam Kikyochi. Keba Nyamba Meba Yang. Kone Kondo Pewara Sho. Tindu Dazen Ribui. Mi Siba Lekurto. Tere Sanje Risoji. Sanje Sesu Tajurto. Tanya Dagi Chineta. Rita Tumbe Lezante. Kime Sumbe Ritela. Yabor Mijur Tetaracha. Sit down now. So with this, the ceremony for generating the awakening mind is done. Then so this, on the part of the initiates, you need to generate yourself into the deity. This is those who have received empowerment before. So you dissolve into emptiness. The Sanskrit mantra Om Svabhava Shuddha, Om, it's composed of 3 syllables, A, U, Ma, and each of them symbolize the body, speech, and mind, which is the basis upon which the sense of self arises. So the self is designated upon the combination of body, speech, and mind. And then Svabhava Shuddha means, purified by the inherent existence. So, although body, speech, and mind, and the self that is imputed upon it may appear as if it possesses an objective existence, it is devoid of such an existence. And Sarva Dharma means all phenomena, which includes the basis of the sense of self, such as the body, speech, and mind. And all of these, too, are devoid of inherent existence. So in this way, the mantra presents the emptiness of both the person as well as phenomena. And then how does one meditate on such an emptiness? Om Shunyata Jnana. Shunyata is emptiness, which refers to the 2 forms of no self, and jnana refers to wisdom that recognizes, that understands emptiness, and vajra connotes indivisibility. So the wisdom realizing emptiness has to be a non-dual wisdom that does not realize emptiness in a kind of a dualistic manner, but in a direct experiential way, without any form of duality. And now Vajra, Svabhava, refers to the nature. So, for example, if we say that the nature of my mind is the same as the nature of the flower in front of me, but if you reflect upon the ultimate nature, which is the absence of inherent existence, then we can see, insofar as the emptiness is concerned, there is no difference at all between the emptiness of my mind and the emptiness of an external phenomena like a flower. So the emptiness of mind is really indivisible from the mind itself. The moment mind came into being, its emptiness as well as arises. So there's totally indistinguishable. So as entering the middle way says that all phenomena possesses dual aspects, the conventional truth and the aspects of the ultimate truth. So here, Svabhava refers to the indivisibility of the ultimate nature of all phenomena. So by Atmakohang means to really absorb your mind entirely in the awareness of that kind of emptiness. So I've explained yesterday as well as today. So here, you have to reflect upon emptiness. When we talk about emptiness here, meditation, the emptiness we're talking about is emptiness of yourself, and particularly the consciousness, your own consciousness. So let's do that. So, the understanding of the emptiness of mind, and while one remains equipoised in the awareness of that emptiness, So when one has attained a state where one's mind is completely equipoised, never wavering from this, this is Buddhahood. Whereas the Bodhisattvas, although may realize emptiness directly, but during the post-meditation sessions, they still have dualistic perceptions. So the Buddhas remain unwavering and totally equipoised on emptiness. That's why the Buddha's direct perception includes that of both truths, the conventional as well as ultimate truth. So in this awareness of emptiness, all dualistic perceptions are dissolved. So here, one has to dissolve all perceptions and attitudes of ordinariness, and in that dissolved state, an empty state, from within that state, then you should imagine where the site where you are, a letter thumb, syllable thumb, which then sitting on a lotus and a moon disk, and then this thumb transforms into a white Tara, as depicted on the tantra, on the tanka, seated, one face, two-armed, with the right hand in a giving gesture, left hand in a preaching gesture. And if you haven't received empowerments before, then visualize white Tara at your crown, not yourself. At your crown, from a syllable thumb arises a white Tara. So this is how you should meditate. So at the Tara's body, you should visualize white Om at the crown, at the throat, and Hum at your heart. As for the actual empowerment, on the basis of Dharma and on the pills and so on. So first, it involves drawing forth all your lost vitality and lifespan. So imagine at the the Guru in the form of White Tara. Imagine he makes an aspirational prayer to White Tara, and light rays emerge from the Guru's heart, touches that of the White Tara, and then the light rays goes to all directions and draws forth all the degenerations and damages that has afflicted on your life, longevity, vitality, and so on. All of these are brought forth in the form of vases filled with nectar and light rays, and they absorb into yourself as White Tara, and nectar's descent, which fills your body. And imagine that all the defects of your longevity and life and health have been repaired. So yesterday we spoke briefly that there are external 5 elements and internal 5 elements, and how they are connected, and within the internal elements they are subtle and so on. And ultimately you have the subtlemost inner elements in the form of this light and energy. So here, having made request to the White Tara, and light rays emerge from the heart of deity Tara and goes to all directions and brings forth the vitality and essential elements from all the external elements from outside in the form of light rays, nectars, and so on. They absorbed into the white Tara's body. So in the form of, the water elements in the form of white light, in all the fire elements, essence of the fire elements in the form of red nectars and light rays, the wind in green color of light rays and nectar, and this all the elements of space, essence of space, emerges in the form of blue lights and blue light rays and nectar. They dissolve into the Tara, which then flows down and fills your entire body. And since your body is composed of the 5 elements, and so when all the vital essences of the elements are brought into your body, imagine that your lifespan, your energy, and your vitality have all been repaired and restored. And next, so next is restoring your power and merits, good merits. So for here, as you make a fervent request to White Tara and the Guru, light rays radiate from the heart of White Tara to all directions and draw forth the power, force, and the good merits of all the celestial beings and so on. And also from various sentient beings on the earth, such as human beings and so on. And from the Nagas, underground Nagas and so on, their good merits and their power, influence and so on are drawn forth in the form of various auspicious symbols, like the 8 auspicious symbols and so on, and they dissolve into you. And as a result of this, imagine your force, your vitality, and merits are all restored. And in this way, you attain the power of longevity. And next, so restore one's broken vows and precepts and so on. So due to the power of making fervent request to the Guru and the meditation deity Tara, White Tara, light rays radiate from their heart towards all directions and draws forth. And since all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past have really generated the awakening mind for the benefit of all sentient beings like ourselves, so the welfare of all sentient beings like ourselves is there of utmost concern. So therefore they are dedicated to the bringing about the welfare of all sentient beings. So on your part too, you make the pledge that I will utilize my body, speech and mind and the effort of all of these for the benefit of other sentient beings. So, and if we make such an altruistic intention, this is the highest offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So because our welfare is of their utmost concern, when we think along similar lines, we will receive the blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So this is a nature. For example, like even conventionally, if we trust someone, that the person to whom you entrust yourself will do their best to help you and be kind and so on. Similarly, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, because they are completely other-oriented, their utmost concern is that of our well-being. So if we live according to their principle, then we lay the foundation for pleasing them. So in this way, we receive blessings. So then, imagine that the blessings of body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas in all 10 directions and Bodhisattvas, they are drawn forth in the form of various sizes of images, mantras, as well as hand implements, as well as light rays and nectars. They emerge and then dissolve into your body. So as they dissolve into your body, you receive the blessings of the body, speech, and mind. So and as a result of receiving the blessings, the potency of your engaging in virtuous actions comes to be increased, and many of the obstacles will be undermined. Next is dissolving the longevity deity into you. So the Torma, as I lift the Torma up, which has been visualized as a white Tara. So imagine as I recite the names of the lineage Guru Masters, all of their intentions are awakened, and then they all dissolve into each other and gradually dissolving into the white Tara. And when I say Zao Hom Bam Hom, imagine that a replica of white Tara's image dissolves into each one of you. And in this way, all the obstacles to your longevity as well as good health are all overcome, eliminated, and establishes the basis for the arising of wisdom as well as altruistic intention, and enhances these qualities in you so that soon you will be able to fulfill the aspiration that you have made to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings.
저서 배는 논이 이제 필요 개발 논시 원문을 못 써. 이제 신경 넣어서 다도 논만 쓰는 거 다 논만 써. 다 논만 써.
Next, longevity empowerment on the basis of the long life nectar. And next, it's the pills. And the next is enhancing your life. So with this, the longevity empowerment of White Tara is done. So that's it. So in the afternoon there will be an occasion to say a few words. So yesterday and today we have discussions. What is the main subject matter was how to train our mind and transform it. This is something that we need to think about. We have a very alert mind, an intelligent mind. So we need to utilize that skill that we have, capacity that we have to transform our mind and discipline it from an untamed state, deluded mind, to a less deluded and disciplined state of mind on the basis of having developed interest in the Buddha Dharma. And we have the opportunity now to bring about that kind of transformation. And here we should use the intelligence that is gifted to us as human beings towards that end. That's it. Thank you. So next is the long life puja.
Emenganze jalo sowa de jambe jizon de jen dene gun lewa bege jajen lan. Yave lonje namre jinde ze jenze dome jalo sowa de jenge de de nyedon se zo ne jedo nare jodo ze. Kunje nyebara jabe kebe jo lobe yenye jalo sowa de tobe jonlo ngodo reba. Tenje zeme goja leje ne nanje lome jinze zema ba joje lambe jala zawa. Chena zeme negun legon jen dozen zoje langwe de la. Nyede mejun juze donge be joje dabe jala zawa. Pome goje leon shirjen de yume dare ome zejen. Genje jonde nave dreme ba baba drede jala zawa. Yomden jala jeve londen do me bang gombe menga jejen. Yomjon shirjen shonjo zede ba lombe zenge zambo zawa. Dewa bonde konde lede jen danje yume lojen zozo. Mano ledon denge chokyo ba yunde vege jala zawa. Lazo yende nobe zela wan deden deme rendo bebe. Yajin jonde lede deden jo jaja vege jala zawa de dozon zage gaze mal. Zomje lamdo donze de ganjon doden bebe jenjen je jawa ade jala zawa de deda zanlen gengyo gebe. Maza leje jone jona la meje danve yige zedabe dagye minjen dova jen. Shiye neze denye denjebe denje gowa jodo jeje. Seme dambe gyazon deva den dalan zawa zova jenye. Dogen nyeje darba denyebe nyejon lodan jonan jodebe jode dobe nyeje zawa jeme janzen jomba jenye lo jenda jembe jonye denan la dezan gombe bare jemba. Loje debe zane langwen la nyewa de la nyewa jenye lo jejen jewa lazon dembe. Edo jedan jebe london den zinjen be la jinda jena la zomba den la jawa jewa. Dede gundo dezan jedo ye jeve deda lozo yam. Tambe jedo rado bewa ye zalen zajen dado zegyo je. Dede donga yondo zalan de denye lendo nanyen jaw. Komba nyuwa nyedo do yizen joven dunye yo. Omo zombawa jodo zawada. Zombawa jodo han domba nyedo jo dombe. Sengi jembo gege debe rimbo che te shumshi dan jewa nazo doje zembe uzo banle bema gaba jama gebe ale dave jingo je dendo dezon zange kunje ngo bande lama dambe to nambara medobe yije dedon zondo ngo damye gavo dele veze je baba je zenjenge denje Zoro de yonzo gyowa Bande lama damba jizin yijin golo Gondo denge dawa da kajen Nobo chuji tima meba da danjebe Jeji cha nyin jin zomda demba Longzo jodo lembe nazi jin Chayeva chujin ge chagya zewa Yunba uba la gabe yuwa de zenge do Dama nyinge degar de zonge sange zembe dara zawa jela zemo zondo gebe üge medo kacewa ye devo ye gambe nambaray Oda dünde rebe zebe tabara cenje lembo rendo canwa rembo ce gen nazo ge Dar nazo ge deyadan dara mabe şanda cen şada ce gedon ge şoba caca ge de nala ce de yeje ge ce de ngava daye gevye dan vyoga ce de ce o omo cimba a doa wan doye wan de veze tebe na jenge nene cizima kamala sange da cancu zembe soge gova ombe da zaman
when a male gengyo jomde gojene de jezo jomde gewa jame domaru dola zeje doje namjaje melon geje gomba yonzo geje roden zede delane deje cheyen bodan lendone zode jenla nazo denje Taye zenjen zonan jeje yonda gozen jede nyozo Lama leva eva mege ojemba jo benza ameda gondale ana Omo zomba wa joda zawa dama zomba wa joda ha domba nyedo gyo dombe ngale omle rimba je nuya je gaje wa nanje nando omo vedo jowa le je la zele ye jaze shese zando medo dove mamente jeze ramola soba nanda je dova nanga do nyamba yo oma ara gambande bebe orjana enda mana bebe de aloje gende nyo de zandam Sanje jendo mede bewa ye dogen nanda jenla juba jo doje deme ye wonve ngaje yenja jade doje deve belana jenen dala gadenze omonguru ayadare zabare aragan bunza menga zamanda barana zamaya jere awo doje deme ye wonve ngaje jase jade doje deve belana jene dala gadenze omongoro ayadare zabare vare pande pade zavon sonayam samaya jere avon daje jeme yevon ngage shesi chode da dage deve belana jene dala gaden omongoro ayadare zabare vare enzamana punza menga zamada parana samaya jere a Daje jeme yevon ve ngage sando jode da daje deve belana jene dala gade omongoro ayadare zabare vare porjana bunza menga samada parana sam shiri java jaze jezele drobe shinga gyaze medo gyaze zo yenden gyaze gyawa gajela deva gyaze bela jezoze omongoro ayadare zabare vare bube punza mega samara parana samaya jere a Yava gyaze jezele drobe shinga gyaze tubi gyaze zo yende gyaze gyawa gajela deva gyaze bela jezoze omongoro ayadare sabare vare deva punza mega samara parana samaya jere a Yava gyaze jezele drobe shinga gyaze nanse gyaze zo yende gyaze gyawa gajela deva gyaze bela jezoze omongoro ayadare sabare vare deva punza menga samara parana samaya jere a Yava gyaze jezele drobe shinga gyaze chicho gyaze zo yende gyaze gyawa gajela deva gyaze bela jezoze omongoro ayadare Gyatso Chötse Le Dröbe, Shingan Gyatso Nötse Gyatso Zo, Yunden Gyatso Gyawa Kwa, Yaba Gyatso Bilo Chötso Se, Omon Goro Ayatare Sabare Ware Yende, Bonsa Menga Samada Parana Samaya Jere A. Yawa Gyatso Chötse Le Dröbe, Shingan Gyatso Senye Gyatso Zo, Yunden Gyatso Gyawa Kwa, Yaba Gyatso Bilo Chötso Se, Omon Goro Ayatare Sabare Ware Yende. Yende Zame Gyo Chege Yende Zame Gyo Pabe Yende Zame Gyo Zame Gyo La Dejebe Namba Mimba Zame Gyo Nanda Jen La Jebo Lama Jamde Yeje Kolala, Daje Dage Dage Jeva, Omangura Ayadare Sabare Vare Eda Mangala Ponda Menga Samada Bar Samaya Jere Yemajeva Lana Me Ranja Jeva Jembaba Suge Lama Melaje Suge Jeva Jenlabe Omangura Ayadare Sabare Vare Roba Ponda Menga Samada Parana Samaya Jere Ema Jeva Lana Me Ranja Jeva Jembaba Daye Lame Bewanzen Daye Jeva Jenla Omangura Ayadare Sabare Vare Shada Lana Me Ranja Jemba Jembaba Daye Lame Denje Daye Jeva Janabe Omangura Ayadare Sabare Vare Yende Bonda Menga Samada Parana Samaya Jere Ema Jeva Lana Me ranjan jeva jembo reje lame jezeze roye jeva jalabe omangora ayadare sabare ware Sabunda menga samada barana samaya jere ao ema jeva lana me ranjan jeva jembo ba reje lame dazaze reje jeva jala Omagora ayadare sabare vare parsha padeta samada barana samaya jere Omagora ayadare sabare saranga bunda menga samada barana samaya jere Omagora ayadare sabare vare gedo balange bunda menga samada barana samaya jere Omangoro ayadare sabare vare pidan buddha menga samada parana samaya jere Omangoro ayadare sabare vare shada buddha menga samada parana Dore ma do dore jegede dore nana layande do mayan la ja Yamagabe unebe dave suge dendendo doje gidon chenze ma joje ma la ja jelo denge dave danda je dawala ne gade Gena danje yonzo ma joje lana ja jelo jodolo ne dozanje dozanje gege Dejin peni chanve yon pa ma jama ja jelo kowa be seba zige lane yige Yonzo kwe namba jen kolo jen la cha lo Lama jeze ma sebe dowa dave ranjen ke kolo Sige wa moje ngaba da dembe dewa danye kabo te dago do Oma a koro benza dara bara manda Menzo jire wagenda Suma de jana jazana dara samu da jire bara zawa sede Ayu pune jana purin koro shebe kowa dendo o gyabdo ha Tsibje la dune zande yego do dare dore so shebe yindo re yewa de chirge moge namala a ye o re re ne ye Ang a jebo yungo do yewa de chirge moge la gaga nga da nya da na da na ba yara la wa jaga za haja jeba yego do yewa de chirge moge la yedama yedo damba we yeden de ganda da gada yawa da de ganda yone roda eba a shamana jeba yego do yewa de chirge moge la do jengombo de go wa de chirge do zena ye de yego do bo Tori Sangura Rai Pune Jana Putin Guru So Zomi Topo Dinze Da Che 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 Mo Le Da Lama Dam Je Je Ba Ya Ne De Je De Je So Se Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Yan Ban De Lama Dam Ba Ye Go De Ge Ge Ba Do Ze Je Me Ze Ye Mo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Rai Pune Jana Pune Lo Non De Je Ge Ze De Da Nya Me La Ma Lo Lo Ba Ge Do Do Ne Je Bo Ya Ne De Je De Je So Ze Don De De Ro Je Ne Ya Ba De La Ma Da Ba Ye Go De Ge Ge Ba Do Ze Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Jana Pune Ye So Ge Ze Je Ge Won Jo Da Nan De Zhang Jo Zhang Bo Da Gen Ge Da She Nan Ye Yang Ne De Zhen Zhen She So Ze Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Yang Ban De La Me Dan Ba Ye Go Ze Ye Ye Ba Do Ze Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Jana Pune Gur So Je Nga Se Na Wang La Da Yong Zhen Ban Den Gen Zhen Da Ben Zhen Jo Le Nan Je Ya Ne De Zhen Den Je So Se Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Ya Ban De La Ma Dan Ba Ye Go De Ge Ge Ba Do Zhen Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Guru Ye So Zo Zhen Je Ge Ge Ba Da Guen Gen Gen Ze Won Jo Da Gen Jin Lo So Gen Ze Ya Ne De Zhen De Je So Ze Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Jiang Ban De La Ma Dan Ba Ye Go De Ge Ge Ba Do Zhen Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Jana Pune Guru Ye So Ge Da Wang Jo Ra Den Da Do Je Zhang Wa Gan Jo Ba Gen Zhen Ze Wa Lun Do Jiang Ne De Zhen De Je So Ze Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Jiang Ban De La Ma Dan Ba Ye Go Ze Ge Ge Ba Do Zhen Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Jana Pune Guru Ye So Gun Je Lo San Ja Zo Da Ne Den Zhan Ya Da Ba Ye Ke Den Lo San Den Ba Ya Ne De Zhen Den Je So Ze Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Jiang Ban De La Ma Dan Ba Ye Go De Ge Ge Ba Do Zhen Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Jana Pune Guru Ye So Ram Zhang Ri La Wang Jo Wei Jia Da Ma La Zhang De Da Jin Jin Da Wei La Ma Ya Ne De Zhen De Je So Ze Ne Jo De Ro Je Ne Ya Ban De La Ma Dan Ba Ye Go De Ge Ge Ba Do Ze Je Me Ze Ye Ngo Do Ze Ze Je Om Dar Tu Dar Tu Re Sangura Ra Yu Pune Jana Pune Guru Ye So Lama Nanda Dunge Ge Zombe Tuwa Nega Veze Bado Me Ba Zhe Jin Lama Ve Ba Me Yong So Gyo Ba Le Gombo Tse Dan Yi She Bado Me Ba Punda Gala Ma Ve Dan Cha Ba She Je Cha Nye Se Ge Bomba Je Me Ge Tu Ze Ju Gen Je Nyam Cha Ge De Na Zhen Ba Da Da Rin Ba Je Gen Ge Gen Ba Cha Do Je Ge Mo Dong Ge Jo Ba De Du Wa Ji Ye Le Ve Ze Jo Jo Je Ne Ju Gong De Ge De Ve Tse Da Tse Na Dan Je Ve Ze Ge Nam Ba De Pombe Nando Sove Chime Tuzu Chokin Tokyo Tenye Kendo Choje Kane Nuwe Pande Lama Dambe Uzu Zambe Buga Nisho Kurege Na Tamje Ka Mada Nangwe Nede Dede Tima Yembe Chive Chiwa Tamje Ta Chime Tseye Ngudu Nyeba Kyo Ndoye Kolo Ngate Na Cheba Le Chime Tuzu Singa Ki Kyunda Weze Kabe Ngake Tadobe Sopa Do Meba De Pande Lama Tamje Megi Kimbe Mata Nangwe Neden Didi Tima Yimbe Chiwe Chiwa Tangje Changshen Da Chiwa Meba Tseye Ngudu Nye Kulege Babe Buga Tamje Tuze Sema Tame Yeba Kyo Layan Tuge Tamye Ngaten Da Cheba Le Weze Kawa Dawa Tong Tuji Do Shawa Dawa Che Kulege Na Tangje Kan Mata Nangwe Neden Didi Tima Changshen Da Babe Buga Ne Kolege Chere Tonga Tanda Kabe Kukando Kyo Jive Tile Tangje Chuba Kyo Layan Tuge Yinro Nale Vese Sera Seshu Mata Bote Kolege Na Tangje Koze Dan Koze Yishe Tamje Keba Che Kolege Babe Buga Nenche Che Kabe Kukange Chere Tonga Tanda Vese Ve Kukando Kyo Jive Tile Tangje Chuba Kyo Layan Nyinge Ngaten Le Vese Mabo Chere Tota Bote Kolege Na Tangje Kan Tenyo Neche Tangje Wando Kolege Babe Buga Nenche Che Vese Ve Kukange Chere Tonga Tanda Ve Babe Kukando Kyo Wange Tile Tangje Chuba Kyo Layan Tuge Ngaten Le Vese Tenga Che Kolege Na Tangje Kan Medimbe Cho Tangje Sa Che Babe Buga Nenche Che Mabe Kukange Chere Tonga Tanda Ve Tinge Kukando Kyo Tabe Tile Tangje Chuba Kyo Layan Tuge Ngaten Le Vese Tengu Mage Shune Nodabut Kolege Na Tangje Kan Chodo Temo Yenguru Tangje Chuba Che Kolege Babe Buga Nenche Che Ve Tinge Kukange Chere Tonga Tanda Ve Tengu Kukando Chinle Tangje Chuba Kyo Layan Tuge Ngaten Le Vese Chinga Che Kolege Na Tangje Kan Ngudu Tangje Tembal Che Kolege Babe Buga Nenche Che Ve Tengu Kukando Chere Tonga Tsamde Ve Chinge Kukando Kyo Chinla Da Chinle Tangje Tembal Kyo Ve Kukando Wa Tangje Chenye Kongen Namba Tabo Tombo Chido Chungwa Sashen Cheba Kebe Lungye Yang Shamba Menyeba Barza Tamje Uwa La Ngomba Medo Kache Mataba Sashen Ninju Da Tembe Bolenge Tamba Kyo Ve Kabe Kukanje Na Pande Lama Tambe Kulu Yinchire Kolo Kabo Sije Kojen Shate Kacha Wada Ye Wada Kawa Mewan Bajen Chube Tenge Tamje Chato Kaje Sema Bawa Da Chende Sema Omandare Dudare Dure Ma Gorobenda Tarabara Ramadu Jiro Mudu Sumari Jana Shandar Samara Jirabara Sausada Yepone Jana Boden Guru Yoso Dare Dudare Ma Gorobenda Tarabara Dudare Dure Ma Gorobenda Tarabara Ramadu Jiro Mudu Sumari Jana Shandar Samara Jirabara Sawa Ayubone Jana Boden Guru Yeso Bema Sado Samayamana Bala Bema Satana Vadira Dirama Solo Jana Solo Jana Rinsa Togamazun Zajen Guru Ha Banga Sada Da Benamon Bezibo Masa Sado Lodo Me Shebe Jengozo Shamdan Yeke Kunza Jere Lana Me Nange Kangun Jojo Gunjo Zonge Dembada Zange Da Janjo Zembada Tanjaki, Chinjilada, Zoni Yonzo Zabe, Nadan de Moda, Jagi Namba, Sanje Medjave Doji, Dejinye Dojo, Gunjo, Zonje Dembada, Sanje da Janjo Zemba Tanjaki, Chinjilada, Zoni Yonzo Zabe, Nana Jembada, Jagi Namba, Sanje Medjave Doji, Dejinye Dojo, Gunjo, Zonje Dembada, Sanje da Janjo Zemba Tanjaki, Chinjilada, Zoni Yonzo Zabe, Nada Jembada, Jagi Namba, Sanje Medjave Doji, Dejinye Dojo. Sambo jebe melando da je, jawa danje ike muzondo, jenje dunye lera deva ye, jawa gun la rado jawa jalo, deje dena dunye sanje. Sanje sege yena jeba da, dedar jege yena maleva, danje jawa daje kanwa me, deda ngaba meze jaza na, yange yen la jaza de, jawa gunje yunde rajo jen, devara jeba danje daje de, medo damba jenwa damba dan, sinye nanda jeba doja. Ame jodo dove damba ye, jawa deda lane jeva je, naza damba nanda dija dan, jema bama ra nyamba dan, gove jeva bawe jogun. Jawa deda lane jeva je, jeva gana lame ja jeva, deda jawa dan je layam. Sambo jela deve doda je, jawa gun la jansa jeva je, deja jeda dema wanje ne, leda nga dan dejen je je jan, deva da je jeva je jeva, deda dan je da je sozo. Soje jawa gunda sanje se, ranje nanda loda me lodan, jawa gunje jana kan la yan, deda gunje jeso da ye ran, gana joje je de drama, sanjo remba sanje ma janye, gombo deda da ye danje la, golo la na me ba goa gue, nyange da de kanje deda, jawa gun la benje dewe je, jawa jenje denye jawa yan, da ye demo ranje sewa je, chanje wada jeje jawa dan, jeso ye ran kwe so,那一直走我当着作为政治进步，我学着洛阳的耶罗巴，列着的年给我自己罗，列人中的罗。
Tarche Sishi Zukin Zamling Shidi Deben Pegi Lana Mebe Uti Jino Konsekamgun Chimpucho Gonen Shucho Tarche Sishi Zukin Zamling Shidi Deben Pegi Lana Mebe Uti Jino Konsekamgun Chimpucho La Taja Tangme Pune Tari Cha Amerike Pimi Serge Jinding Ne Jino Koskam Chumbu Chola Gadin Jiding Gi Tinshu Danbu Shue Gi Zerin Ti Unzu Shu Chochi 소가나를 페베 미만
So
남부주
the Tibetans who have gathered here, please pray for the long life of His Holiness with single-pointed faith. Here today, the long life offering, among the people who are making offerings, there are representatives from different countries, as well as the Himalayan people who are represented here from the communities in various parts of the country states here. Cambodians, Philippines, Chinese. Let me please briefly introduce each of them. Among the associations that are participating in this long life prayer, there is the committee for organizing it. There is a representative who has specially come from Ganden Monastery in Mongolia, represented by the abbot himself with his assistants. And then there were representatives from the Mongol people of the Russian Federation, like Kalmykia, as well as Nepal and trans-Himalayan regions such as Bhutanese and the Chushigangtu organization, local Tibetan youth organizations, and Women's Association, and Kidong Tujicholing Nunnery from Nepal, and Canada's and former members of the Dalai Lama's office based in Canada, and Tibetan Association of Business People, Laos, Cambodia, Burma, Philippines, Korea. There are representatives from these Buddhist countries who have participated in the organizing of this Tenshuk ceremony, and they are going to make offerings to His Holiness. So at the end of the making offerings, the Tashi Namgyal, who is the president of the Tibetan Association, will make a final remarks. The object of veneration of many people, the world, the leader of the Tibetan people, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and we pray that you live long. At your presence, let me say the following. So among your followers and believers, we have the Tibetan community of various associations in North America. So you have appeared in this world to help fulfill the aspirations of human beings at this difficult time, and you've engaged in enlightened activities both for the people of Tibet as well as the world. So you have helped particularly establish the cultural institutions in India, and you have established the various traditional organizations, institutions that have helped revive and maintain and develop further the Tibetan culture. And the Tibetan people have, although small community, we have been able to uphold and be the custodian of this great Nalanda tradition. And you have led us through our struggle to protect all of this. And although the force of China, which is very powerful, have annexed Tibet, from a very young age, at the 16, you assumed the responsibility of leadership at such a tragic and difficult time. And for around a decade, you struggled hard to find an accommodation with the Chinese authorities. But once it became evident that there was no possibility of such accommodations, you fled into exile to make sure that you remain a free spokesman for the benefit of the Tibetan people. And after coming into exile, you've helped establish all the schools as well as the historically important cultural centers. So we have been in exile, and you have been exiled for almost 60 years now. But during this period, you have helped bring the Tibetan community to the level of the standard of the world. And all of this is due primarily and to your own leadership, only to you, because of your leadership. So within India, which is a very large country, the Tibetans have been able to maintain their own distinct identity, culture, language, and so on. And today, the Tibetan language, identity, and culture remains very strong, and that's thanks only to your kindness, your ability, and your leadership. And throughout all of these, you have given advice, led us Tibetan people, and furthermore, you have also reformed the political process itself such that the 400-year-old institution of the Dalai Lama being the political leader of the Tibetan people have been brought to an end, and bringing thus a truly democratic system to the Tibetan people. You have also striven for a long time to resolve the problem of Tibet through dialogue and peaceful negotiation, and you have been a real champion, bringing the cause of Tibet and the plight of Tibetan people to the awareness and consciousness of people all over the world. And thanks to your leadership, the issue of Tibet and the cause of Tibet and the plight of the Tibetan people are in the explicit consciousness of people everywhere in the world. And for example, the Tibetan people who are living in North America, through your leadership, a formal program was introduced to bring 1,000 Tibetans as a formal resettlement in the North American continent. And because of this, we have been able to establish a base here in North America, allowing us the freedom and the facility and the opportunity to continue to engage in our struggle and also maintain our culture, language, and so on. So we would like to take this opportunity today to thank you, and also at the same time make a request to you, an appeal to you. Just as it is said that the Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, without having to appeal to him, constantly thinks about the welfare of all sentient beings. And particularly, Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, has a special destiny with the Tibetan people. So please, we request you to remain for long, healthy, and continue to be our leader. And on our part too, so in 2008, you gave a comprehensive advice to the Tibetan people. We have lived explicitly according to that. Although we may not have been able to fulfill entirely your aspiration, but for which we apologize, but we have over 30 Tibetan establishments, associations on the North American continent. So on our part, we will pledge to you that we will continue to engage in struggle for the common cause of Tibet and the Tibetan people. And unfortunately, there are some minor group of people who have started to insult you and defame you. We will remain vigilant against them, and we will remain resolute. And finally, we would like to request you to continue to remain strong and live long and continue to be the source of hope for us Tibetans, particularly those who are struggling inside Tibet, who are deprived of freedom. So please remain firm and resolute and healthy and live as very long. So with deepest respect, we make this appeal to you on this day, the 10th of July, 2015. Thank you. So today, primarily, not just through mouths, but from a depth of your heart. So here, an offering of long life puja has been made, connected with White Tara rituals. So, and the president of the North American Association, in your statement, you mentioned about how you remain resolute and work hard. So on your part, continue to do so. On my part too, of course, I will set the intention, as you requested, to live long. And as I mentioned before, in any case, Buddhists speak about karmic connection and connection through prayers. So in my case, I never talk about my own high realizations, but I feel that there is a special karmic connection with the Tibetan people. It is very evident in our Tibet, the freedom of Tibet. And the freedom of Tibet is intimately connected with the survival and the protection of the Buddha Dharma, which is comprehensive. And the question of whether this comprehensive Buddha Dharma, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, whether this will survive or not, is ultimately connected with the issue of freedom inside Tibet. In India, so there are places where the Buddha was born, where major enlightenment activities of the Buddha took place. Nalanda is the site where many great masters like Nagarjuna and so forth thrived, where most important texts that contributed to the great insights and opening of the human intelligence were composed. But today, if you think about Nalanda, we only see ruins. And if you look at most of the important Buddhist sites, they're in a similar situation. So the actual Buddha's teachings that is alive and living is found only among the Tibetans. So we are the custodians of that teaching. So on my part, I'm committed to upholding and protecting and developing this very profound Nalanda tradition. And I have a deep admiration for this. And I also recognize this to be tremendously relevant and important and beneficial in our everyday life. It's not just in words or not just a matter of loyalty, but I've struggled, I've striven hard, and I have the intention, I set the intention to live for at least another 20 years. I have the hope as well as I pray. So when we talk about karma and aspiration, prayer, it's not a matter of one or single individual. It's connected with the community. So on your part, you also have to be, strive hard. There shouldn't be any pretension to be very serious in front of me, but doing something elsewhere differently. So what is important is to have this kind of collective sense of responsibility. So, of course, it's important for individuals to have their own opinion and seeking truth from facts. So, but your personal opinion should be really grounded in facts, not just at whim. And this, I think, is important. And then, as I mentioned before, in the past, Tibet remained splintered for a long time. And from a political point of view, it was a rather embarrassing situation. But during all this period, a sense of unity that is based on the idea of I am a Tibetan really came from the shared heritage of Buddhism and the shared language. So, of course, there will be changes to the political system and the political structure, but what makes a people to survive and people to thrive is really their language, their culture, and their tradition. So I already spoke about this, so keep that in mind. So when we talk about protecting your culture, language, and tradition, it's not a simply matter of putting on Tibetan costumes and so on, and putting some dance shows and so on. Yeah, I spoke for an entire day yesterday. These are all part of the classical Tibetan heritage. And I gave the talk in Tibetan. So many of you, if your relationship to the language is such that you don't understand, that shows that your level of knowledge is not adequate. So you need to cultivate knowledge yourself of the language. So there is a sense of unity among the Tibetan people. And to ensure the long-term survival of that kind of unity and sense of Tibetanness really needs to be grounded in gaining greater mastery of your language and culture. So when we speak about spirituality, culture, and language, the protection of language is very, very important. And I wanted to re-emphasize this and repeat it. So when you ask me to remain long, and I wanted to tell you also, you also have something to do, something to contribute, do some work, so that I can live long. So in your statement, you also alluded to the protesters, Shukden protesters. It's not an old new story. It first emerged from the time of the fifth Dalai Lama. So there were some, inauspicious events around the fifth Dalai Lama's time, and seems to be a pattern in that during the third Dalai Lama's time, there were also inauspicious events, and the spirit itself identifies as the ghost of the Gelugpas. So as Shantideva explains in Shantideva's text, he says that if the Buddha is not able to please everybody, how can I, an ordinary person, please all? So of course, if people insult me and defame me, shouldn't worry. It's not really a big deal. I feel sorry for them because some of them are ignorant and they follow after the kind of the projection and speculations of some people. So I feel sorry and compassion from that perspective. I don't feel annoyed. As I mentioned yesterday, I mentioned somewhere that they're using their freedom of speech. I'm also using my freedom of speech. So I know them quite well. I know the problem because first I propitiated the Shukden myself in 1951. Began, and at that time I recognized the Tegyal to be a special protector of the Gelugpas. Lingpa Rinpoche had no connection at all. Gyabje Tshang Rinpoche did propitiate. Gyabje Tshang Rinpoche and Zemer Rinpoche, when they propitiated, but they related to Shukden as just a mundane, worldly protector. They never took him as the ultimate refuge. So this is an important point. So when they do the life empowerment, life entrustment, so actually a yogi who has the power to really assign tasks to the protectors. So the idea here is the protector itself submits to the yogi, not the other way around. So I think it's important to know the situation. The Gelug Association has produced an important book, and this will be probably available in English translation, so you will come to know the situation better. So I think it's important to know the 400-year history of the situation and the problem. And most importantly, I always tell you, from one point of view, not only among the Buddhist followers, but from among the believers of all religious traditions, I promote a non-sectarian harmony and understanding. I've attended mosques and wear the cap, and I've been to Jewish synagogues and I wear the kippah, and I've been to, so the Togyal Shukden practitioners, they have found a photo of me wearing a Muslim cap, and they are now accusing me of being a Muslim. I mean, this is a source of laughter. It's silly. So I emphasize the promotion of harmony and understanding among the followers of all major religious traditions, because we have to live side by side. Buddha appeared in India. Although he was able to perform a lot of enlightened activity, he failed to convert the entire Indian continent into Buddhists. And there were also many great Mahasiddhas and great scholars, but the different traditions remain side by side. And today too, in this world, the diversity of different religious traditions will continue to remain, probably over centuries. So what is crucial is that there needs to be a harmony among the followers. So if that is the case, then within the Tibetan Buddhist followers, we should not have strong sectarian feelings on the basis of identifying I am a Gelugpa, I am a Kagyupa, I am a Nyingmapa, I am a Sakyapa, and so on. So we need a kind of a harmony within our own Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Now, if you read the history of the Togyal practice, especially after the 13th Dalai Lama's death, if you do the research, particularly in the eastern Tibet, it has created a lot of dissension and disharmony between the monasteries and so on. And some of the mediums in trance of Shukden, they have desecrated statues of Padmasambhava and throwing them into river and so on. So there are documented histories. And for example, recently, several years ago in Bhutan, they said, in the past they were saying that the Dalai Lama is wonderful, but be careful because he will be followed by the Gelugpa's ghost. So I heard that in Sikkim, in the old days, when I visited the different Buddhist temples, Tibetan temples, I was told that they do cleansing rituals after I left. So Tsongkhapa's tradition is really pure and impressive, but that cannot be entrusted in the hand of a ghost. The uniqueness and profundity of Tsongkhapa's tradition is found in the 18 volumes of Tsongkhapa. We could almost refer to Tsongkhapa as second Nagarjuna. I may be perhaps being biased because I'm from Amdo and Jeremy Tsongkhapa was from Amdo as well. So, but the point is, if you study Tsongkhapa's text alongside Nagarjuna's writings as well as Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti's commentary and Bhava Viveka's commentary and entering the middle way and so on, if you read them alongside Tsongkhapa's commentary, so it's almost as if Tsongkhapa is composing a similar level of Indian commentary, and particularly his writings of the mature period. And he himself actually sometimes says that I have although said differently elsewhere, but this is how I now have come to understand. So his writings are really impressive. So his tradition is not something that need to rely on some kind of a ghostly protector. There's no basis for that at all. So, the teaching and the tradition of Tsongkhapa can be really found in the 18 volumes of Tsongkhapa's collectors. Of course, the Shukden protesters, they don't know, but there's also a political dimension to their movement. So they really are deserving to our compassion. I don't feel sometimes when they show such anger and hatred towards me, I just smile at them. So in Australia, I noticed there was among the protesters there was a young boy in robes. When he saw my face, he was showing such anger. I felt sorry. So anyway, so that they don't understand the situation. Thank you. So you should just don't be bothered by it.
Pome Derjin Gabo, Yonzo, Sozo Yanda, Rebe, Jedemba, Jole, Nange, Shembo, Jadenzo, Lozan, Gebe, Demba, Rimbo, Jedole, Gole, Jogabe, Gome, Dege, Lambe, Leva, Yimjire, Mave, Senge, Shabdezu, Nazon, Gezon, Zangalan, Gere, Waje, Nejo, Zame, Deshede, Goshi, Ishi, Muzon, Yeze, Wakada, Doje, Jawa, Jadezu, Mabo, Gunjen, Nelo, Jaka, Jezaze, Yezon, Bebe, Ye, Ishi, Meze, Meze, Wanejo, Wanjo, Shembo, Jadeze, Gede, Gaze, Zawa, Gui, Mende, Gava, Naji, Gezan, Bo, Gezan, Duje, Shinza, Jeze, Wazawa, Zembe, Dawa, Jadeze, Konde, Shugu, Tenje, Vara, Shayan, Dene, Gemi, Rapshi, Watreba, Kunde, Sama, Ome, Landenge, Loye, Wamba, Jadeze, Shena, Shizo, Yeme, Degolo, Lewa, Dongeri, Dembe, Maka, Pote, Junso, Nyewe, Shizo, Nambe, Sanji, Ngo, Shabdezo, Konde, Shugu, Zedile, Tinga, Mebo, Linye, Zoba, Jame, Rande, Jibe, Kezo, Nyoko, Zande, Me, Gombo, Shabdezo, Dana, Dubde, Yongzo, Shinda, Manje, Chayin, Tenla, Nyebanje, Denda, Jowa, Gungi, Gyabji, Bo, Tenzi, Gyazo, Wangbe, Shabde, Sipa, Samji, Chukun, Zono, Ye, Kanji, Shabe, Dashi, Kolo, La, Gushi, Dashi, Lingya, Deba, Yin, Chugi, Gyebo, Shembo, Shabde, Zu, Lami, Dude, Sasho, Lai, Wang, Tudo, Nebe, Doshi, Zek, Kanye, Lode, Jari, Shonze, Wang, Chinze, Hiro, Kabe, Shabde, Zu, Sanda, Lumbo, Nida, Neye, Wa, Sansum, Shindo, Yuwa, Mewa, Yin, Chunze, Pashu, Yebe, Shem, Doshi, Chila, Shumje, Den, Shu, Zu, Chime, La, Shu, Sum, Ye, Chin, Lam, Da, Lama, Ina, San, Ye, Shang, Sim, Ye, Tempe, Dom, Ye, Chidra, Sevet, Yemen, Chuwa, Chin, Ye, Lam, Do, Zu, Jawa, Jawa, O Jingan Be Wa Zhu, Om Ben Zon Bo Me O, Wang Zhe Se Ye So Zhe, Om Ben Zo Re Ye O, Chi Zhe Ri Hu Yu Yi Go Ve So Ri, Ge Bo Ri Ra, Sha Lu Ba Bo, Lo Zeng Bu Li, No Ba Lang Jun, Chan Zhe Mi, Lu Da Lu Ba, Nga Ya Da, Nga Ya Shi, Yon De Da Lam Zhe Zhe, Zhe Mi Nian Da, Zhe Mi Nian Ye Da, Rin Bo Chi Ri O, Ba Sam Ji Shin, De Zhe Ye Ba, Ma Me Ba Ye Go Lo Rin Bo Chi, No Bo Rin Bo Chi, Zhe Mo Rin Bo Chi, Lun Bo Rin Bo Chi, Lang Bo Rin Bo Chi, Da Zhu Rin Bo Chi, Ma Me Rin Bo Chi, De Zhin Bo Ye Bo Ma, Ye Ma, Je Wa Ma, Lo Ma, Ga Ra Ma, Me Do Ma, Do Be Ma, Nang Se Ma, Zhi Sha Ma, Ni Ma, Da Wa, Rin Bo Chi, Do Cho Le Nang Bar Ye Wen Ye Zhen, Yu So La Da Mi, Ben Chou Ben Song So Wa, Ma Sang Wa Me Wa, Sang Shi Yi Dong Wa, Di Da Ji Shi Za Wa, Da Gyu Wa Che We, Ban De La Ma, Da Ma Yung So, Den Be Nga Da, Nyang Gun Ye We, Wang Bo, Tam Che Kin Shi Si Wa, Shen Bo, Shi Sun, Chan Be Nga Wa, Lo Sa, Yi Che, Ten Si Kya Su, Si So, Wang Gyu, Zang Ba, Me Be Li, Be Zang Be Shi Nga Ni, Den Da Zhu We, Den Du, Ge Be Ye Wa, Chi Cha Ni, Chi Cha Ye Ba, Den Ba Shu We, Shi She Sang Bo, Do We, Ge We, Ka Ti, Tang Ra Yu Yu, Do Shi Nga Be Wa, Do Shi Zhu We, Den Du, Shi Su, Si, Shi Ne, Ma Yu Sun, Che, Dam Che, La, Shi Du, Che, La, Do, So, Zhen, Be, Yin, Ru, Shi, Me, Do, Do, Li, Ra, Li, Shi, Yin, Den, Yin, Bo, Ni, Son, Ye, Shi, Do, Me, Nian, Be, O, Yi, Zhe, Ge, Nan, Da, Xin, La, Zhe, Bo, Yo, Gang Zhe, Sha, Ren, Go, Ve, Xin, Dam, Ye, Be, Dan, Ye, Wai, Ma, Lin, Zhou, Ye, Ne, Qin, Ren, Xin, Wang, Dian, Xin, Yan, Zu, Yi, Xiang, Shakya Je Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Chinari Ne Donga Shong Je Ne Je Tzu Zombe To Den Kyung Ge Bo Lori Kun De Se Je Sakya Bo Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Sunga Nyin Ju Sema Shin Den Je Kyu Lam Je Bu Nyam Lin She Sam Ni Nen Je Won Ju Ge Ju Dam Be Se Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Samo O Men Da Da Nyin Je We San Jin Do Je Te Be Rim Ye Lam Sa Se Be Ye Lo San Ge We Den Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Den Ne Sun Je Yu Di Shi De Yang Zo Lam Je Mo Go Re Na Ma No Nyam So Le Me Lo San Jo Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Do Yu Shin Da She Se Me Jena Je Zon De Je Ko Lo Ye Long Da Ka Pa Pa Jo Lo San Je Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Do Na She We Ka Chen Nam Ju Da Tu Yu Shin Da Che Da Shi She Zo Dong A Song Je Meng An Do Me Jo Ganjong Je Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Den Zi Shab Den Tu Dun Jin Du Nam Den Pa Ko Lo Song Je Kyung Wan Dan Den La De Be Nye Be Sa Di Me Jin Den Yurin Pa Yu Shi Ji Den Kun Do Ma Zhu Mo Ye Da Do Su Sam Cha Mi Yang Mi Cha Shi Yi Che Chang Den Nu Zhe Ge Zhen Be De Ha Ge Zi Shu Kun Ge Ge Shi Na Yan Den Ne Yong Zo Den Be La Ge Shi Zi Ge Sam Ma De Zong Kun Be Chi Zu Zhen Ba Ye Zhen Yin Den De Za La Nyu Re Zhe Nang Ge Te Du Ge Be Zhen She Shi Dong Wan Ge Zi Yi Wan Chi Ba La Sheng Da Nye She Le La Me Ba Dan Yi Shin De Be Zhu Ge Zhu Ba Shu Da Ye Lu Da Long Zhe Nye Wa Nam Ma Nam De We Gyu Ru Gyu Wa Dan De Da Kun Yi Du Kun Kang Shi Ba De Kun Da La Yong So Men Ba Shu Da Ne Tong De Zhen Da Me She Ba Kun Ya De Ge Be La Zhe Ba Da Men Da De So Mi Nye Zhuo Shi Ba Tam Shi Chan Shu Lang Je Nian De Shu Do Na Ji Zi Nang Ga Ne Ba Dan Zhu E Dong E Ne Ba De Zi Do Da Ye Ne De Ngo Da Pen De Che Ba Nyu Do Gyu Shu San Je Na Zi Zu Do Tam Shi Gyu Ho Wa Shi Da Si Do We San Dan Sha Ya Do Ba Ko Dam La Ye La San Je Pa Wa De La Cha Zi La San Chen Den Da Da Ye Ngen Ga Wa Ga Shi Shi Yu Wa Da Ye De Wa Na Wa Ye Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Nyen Ngen Ne Be She Da Da Rang Ge So Wa Yong Da We San Chen Bong Ba Je Be Je Yu Ren Den Ba Ba Gyu Shi Bu Dan Bo Mo Chong Ma Da No Da Lang Ji Xin Da Da Ren Ji Chang Shu She Da We Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Da Ye San Je Rang San Je Nian De Ba Dan Dan Zong Da La Ju Je We Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Ge Wa Je Wa Do Ma Da Dong Ge Na So Gyong Gyu Shi Chang Shu Den Do Tu Ze We Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Da Ge Zu Chen Du Shu Dan Ga Do Yu Ren Den Je Shi Chu Ju San Je Nian Je We Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Dan Ngu Zhen Zhu Dan Den Be Da Do Den Je San Je Dan Je Je Den Do Da Den Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Su Ju Da Do Den Je Je San Je Nyu Mo Nyu Ma Yi San Je Nye Zu Je Je We Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Dan Den Nam Dar Zang Mi Dan Den Je Gang Ge Ji Nye Wa Gun Be De De Da Ge Ne Den Ba Yu Ren Ba Gyu Shi Yi Shi Den Do Da Ge Nge Ga Do Na Da Den Je Do Ma Nye Den Be Da Ge Den Ba Ba Gyu Shi Ze Wa Gyu Yi Xia Da Dan Zo Wa Yong So Yan La Ni La Dan Wa Yi Ju Zhen Nang Ba Be Gyu Shi Dang Wei Di Wei Sim Chen Nang Chan Be Zi Wa Ben Zhen Zhe De Wa Song La Zha Ge Wei Chu Ye Chi Chi Ye Gyu Shi Dang Wei Ta Shi Gyu Sen Chen Dang E Le Zhe Shi Yang Da Da La Gu Shi Wei Da Wen Nang Ba Be Gyu Shi Da Ye Sim Chi Dong Wei Shi Nyu Ma Me Len Da Da Ge Be De Ban Je Wei Da Wo Yu Rin Ne Gyu Shi Da Ge Mu Du Chen Shen Da Da Wei Chu Len De De Shi Yang Da Da La Gu Shi Wei Da Wo Da Do Ye Gyu Shi Yu Rin Den Ba Chu Ye Ge Wo Zong Ga Wei Ju Zhen Nang Ba Be Wa Da Ge Ye Se Ma Shi Wa Da Dun Je Ma Le Zang Wa Shi Wa Da Dan Shen Ge De Zong Da Je Wei Zong Ni La De Ni Nye Wo Lo Zang Zha Wa Yi Den Ba Yu Rin Ba Yu Shi Be Zong Zo Ba Nga Wa Se Ge Shi Wa Zha Shi De Zong Ge Gong Ba Che Ma Song Ba Ba Zang Ge Be Ma Dang Ma Yin De Shen Ga Wa Den Ne Ji Den Ge Wei Zha Shi Dang Bo Wo De Nye Wa Den Wei Zha Ra Me Ye Wa Ji Den So Na Zha Shi La Da Me Je Zhe Ge Dang Ba Ge Wo Na La Je Je Wa Den Ne Ji Den Ge Wei Zha Shi Nye Ba Wo Gen Den Dang Ba Je Je Den Wei Zha Shi Zha Mi Da La Da La Ma Yi Ge Je Wei Ne So Ji Je Ra Ngo Da Shi Da Be Ge Je Den Ne Ji Den Ge Wei Zha Shi Zha Zeme Yunde Gazer Penga Shen Nyam Jon Dola Boje Dargan Be De Zon De Je Sada La Marje Da Je Den Be Menga De Sözü donza yonzo tobe den zanle yambe bende pedo yedin zenge dam tübe kebona sözü nanca çavo müzellenge tabi yonen be bamen doge narve nyanda do sagan ne zımboge çibo gönşene dega cazu Geva ganjo çönden kendo nan najola le bunye zeme do yenge çembe çala çeme genyodo cebe doje dovan genyama de genyeve Ganjen yibun gibi nince yemezin gibi dona lando me yonzo candı dave bella jurine nindo nabe deve de yonzo benjo rava Ndo süsü zonde kadın la cebe gezon yivo nido zeden dan denden caze janrele cebele zolonca yondan de kava gada cebe gyonan Döndün gündü dozu gyonvadı dona kombo çerezin va gezece geve cemala kancece yonzo gaze melan kancebe cezan dende nyodo cavadı nando çünye samede de da çozo doce doda Dendelo me dende da cace dembe melan geme nyodo Kanre rave goye cengan zo bendan deva malece Cereze va dendin gazo ye şabese de bazı de göce Malon lobe geveten balağı ve nacozu jensun bede samca gibi juva mali va çozum dembezene çeyo